What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Mondays Down South, presented by Seams Media. Before we get started here, I just wanted to shout y'all out. Thank everyone. We've got a ton of support on the last couple of videos on social and whatnot, so really appreciate everyone that's commented, liked, subscribed, all that kind of stuff, and especially kind of the direct messages and stuff we've all received. So really appreciate the support. I'm glad you all are enjoying the comments. As a reminder, we are on YouTube, Spotify. We got a website and a Twitter in the works, but Instagram as well. So, gentlemen, what's up? Another week.
Every week, this is what I look forward to on my Tuesday nights. So much so that I've been putting softball on hold. So you guys can speak to my team for me, given the fact that this podcast comes first. But no, in all seriousness, I'm really glad you said that, because it's been a few weeks since we rolled out the new platform, and I'd say like the 1 month benchmark. And I don't want to get too sappy, but it genuinely means so much that people are responding the way that they are, and we're getting more people watching and more people commenting. And ultimately, our goal in doing this was never to, specifically make money or do this or do that. It's just to entertain people and have fun doing it. And it's been beautiful. So I'm excited to keep this ball rolling, gentlemen. Zach, I'm kicking it over to you.
Size out here implying that we're actually a profitable business endeavor. Which,
Yeah.
Hey, who knows, man?
Really speak to that right now. But, hey, the best part is I'll actually double down on that point, Si, for maybe even a different reason, is we've been doing this for 3 years. We just continue to garnish more support, every single time we do this. So, we really could care less about whether we go heavily in the green or heavily in the red. Well, maybe not too heavily in the red, but, we just do this for a specific purpose. And so it's been cool to see the tradition live on and stuff like that with some of these new added features and whatnot. So, no, definitely just seconding Evan's point there. Thank you guys so much for listening. And we're going to try to keep it creative and keep it fun, too. I mean, this is one of our favorite things to do. So hopefully it's y'all's as well.
With that said, we can go ahead and jump into it. We got a more, a little more creative, not quite as creative as last week, but we got another little different topic. So what we're going to do this week is, for those that watched that Thursday night disaster, Broncos-Colts, that punt fest, and just the mess of a game that Size Colts got a huge win out of, I literally, during that game, if you were on Twitter with some of the memes and the jokes being made, it started with Matt Ryan and it led into Russell Wilson at the end of the game. Like, I think I was on the ground, like, in tears laughing at some of the content Twitter was putting out there, at some of the digs at Matt and at Russ, and, across the board and at that game in general. So it got me thinking, and then you go into the weekend, you got Ron Rivera calling out Carson Wentz. Lots of Kyler Murray Call of Duty jokes as always. So I'm thinking, who are our favorite, we don't have a good word for it, but just like the guys that get all the criticism, like the second they make a mistake, man, they are just getting absolutely hammered on Twitter. You can call it scapegoats, you can call it punching bags, which is my personal favorite, but, who are your favorite guys that just like the second they make a mistake, man, Twitter is just going to be on them. As they always are. So I'll throw out some examples. They're the obvious ones I mentioned. You got Kyler, you got Carson Wentz. I'll start it off because I do have one I want to mention that's an obvious one, and it's obviously Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson brings it on himself. Going up in his early career in Seattle, drafted by that team, led them, to a really successful several seasons. And then, with Sierra, he just turned into this super corny guy that he speaks only in one-liners and, like, all these, like, phrases and, like, philosophical talk. And it's like, dude, you are the most fake guy on the face of the earth right now. And it's okay when he's winning, but when you're going out and having that embarrassing performance that he had on Thursday night, like, it's just pathetic, man. And, like, he did it, Broncos country, let's ride. And he's still saying it, like, in his really somber tone on the press conference after the game. Like, dude, sometimes you just got to go out there on the podium and be like, dude, we sucked. I don't want to answer these questions, but I have to. Like, let's get it over with. I'm not going to drop some, philosophical quote on you. So that's my first one. Twitter, bravo to you again, like I said. Just a hilarious time on Thursday night. I know that's an obvious one, but, it had to be mentioned.
I'm going to jump in real quick, and I think the whole world currently is going at Russell Wilson, and I actually want to offer him a little bit of a defense because, albeit he has been awful to start the season and obviously struggled a little bit, especially post-injury last year with the Seahawks. But the one thing I will say about Russell Wilson is from the moment he stepped foot on the field in the NFL, he's been a stand-up guy. And I do agree that maybe he should, in his press conferences, speak a little bit more to the negative. But I also am not going to fault somebody for keeping a positive light and for being somebody that sets a good example for people. And that's sometimes few and far between when it comes to dynamic players of his caliber. One thing I will say, though, is in backing up Evan's claim, when Russell Wilson did win Super Bowls, it was with maybe the most loaded defense ever and arguably one of the greatest running backs ever. So a great loaded wide receiver core and just like good coaching all around. So one thing that I will say about Russell Wilson is he has not yet proven to me that he can have success as the best player on a team. And I believed that he would figure it out. I don't know if maybe him getting older or the injuries contributing to him not being as mobile as he used to be is contributing to that. But I am starting to believe that maybe Russell as an individual player wasn't as good as I thought he was. But I do think he'll be better than he has been to start the season as he progresses his career with the Broncos. So I'll give him a little defense for that. Zach, I'll kick it over to you.
I struggle with this one because of obviously the initial predictions before the season started and how I thought the Denver Broncos were going to perform. So obviously really surprised by it. And it's just like, yeah, Russ Wilson's post-game interviews are more disheartening than they seem more artificial and fake than the person who is carrying the camera that's now charging Devontae Adams for like assault, essentially. I'm not sure if you guys saw that, but when you get a $140 million deal in Devontae Adams, I'm definitely going to take a dive too and start rolling around in pain, saying that he broke my collarbone or something like that. So that fakeness and artificialness, it just has a very, very similar feel to Russ Wilson's press conferences right now. He, I think what Evan mentioned was definitely the weird one, and the one that was like clickbait all over the internet was, him somberly saying Broncos country, let's ride, as he was like fading away from the podium. It made no sense at all. So overall, it definitely seems artificial and fake. But I think he's good enough to get them out of the jam. The problem is just re-winning the locker room over because Ev has mentioned this before. He's a $250 million player, crazy contract, huge risk for the Denver Broncos. So, he's obviously got to show that he knows he needs to. And, he missed like 2 or 3 open receivers, not only that whole night on Thursday night, but also obviously in the crunch time when, despite all the mistakes that the Denver Broncos made, they could have left with a win, right? And then moved on to next week with that win. Missed KJ Hamler right down the middle of the field. That's all she wrote. So that's mine on Russ Wilson. I knew Evan was going to bring up Russ, and I'm sure he'll bring up a couple other players that we like too, Kuna.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And Zach, I feel like that's a perfect tee up for you to give yours, man.
Yeah, why don't we stay in the same division? So I didn't know if it was necessarily players or coaches, but I got creative with it. And Brandon Staley, obviously, maybe this is a jab back at Evan, right? Because Evan is more analytics driven than Sinai might be. We all love watching sports, but we all see football from different angles. And Ev is really interested in the analytics portion, whether they go for 2. And one thing I will give these credits for, especially these young coaches who have really started to drive home at what we're seeing here, is a lot of teams are now going for it on 4th and short. And it doesn't necessarily matter if it's a 2-point conversion. It could be really anywhere on the field as long as it's on the 30 or 40-yard line when it's your own territory that you have to get across, right? So you're not even in your opponent's territory yet. Well, that's what Brandon Staley chose to do with 1:30 left and 1 timeout left, winning by only 2 points. I guess his analytics guy said, hey, look, we should go for it, and listen to him, which had Keenan Allen tweeting from the sidelines, WTF. Now, we won't repeat what that means, but we're old enough, I guess we're young enough too, right, to understand what some of these abbreviations mean here or there from some of these players. So, I couldn't agree more with Keenan there. This is why it's important, and this is why Brandon Staley deserves to get a lot of criticism. There were 3 teams in the AFC Conference last year that missed the playoffs at 9-8. The Chargers, playing in the difficult division that they are in the AFC West, the most challenging in the NFL, they can't afford to make mistakes like this where they don't convert on a 4th and 1, and Jacoby Brissett doesn't really need to do anything or put in any serious work to get them 10 yards down the field in a minute and a half while they have 2 timeouts to kick a field goal, right? With the field goal kicker who also kicked the 60-plus yarder against the Carolina Panthers to start the game. I remember watching him do that, drilled it right down the middle of the uprights. So for the Chargers to go for it on their own 46-yard line with 1 timeout left, while they were up 2, they could have just pinned it deep and then let their defense, take over and at least prevent the Browns from clawing their way back up the field. It just seemed like a risk not being willing to, or a risk that wasn't worth being taken. And I think he deserves a lot of criticism for it. So that's what I saw on the internet. But Brandon Staley, I get that you're an analytics guy. I appreciate it, but do better and win your team some football games, because if they do end up in that 9-8 territory, which they were last year, they will probably miss the playoffs again. Hopefully it's not from a stupid decision.
I'm sure I'm going to get flamed for this, but I actually agree with this decision. Not because I think every team should do it, but I think when you're playing a team like the Browns and you're up to, that even if you punt it, you're giving that team with timeouts and with time the ability to come back and kick a field goal to win the game because you're up 2. If you're up 3 or more, then I wouldn't do it. But the flip side to that is nowadays I think the best coaches, the most successful ones, are actually the ones that are choosing to do so. Guys like Andy Reid, guys like Sean McVay. And I don't blame him for wanting to do that with a dynamic offense, an amazing playmaker in Austin Eckler, one of the best young quarterbacks in football, and multiple wide receivers that you can trust in that moment, along with a tight end that I believe was underutilized this weekend, but somebody you can also rely on as a third down blanket in Everett. So I don't actually disagree with the choice to go for it. I just think sometimes when people do that, they overcomplicate it, right? Like I feel like if you're going for a 4th and 1, just get the ball to Austin Eckler in space. What are the odds he doesn't get you a yard? I feel like the problem is people overthink that aspect of it, right? Like if you're going to go for it on 4th and 1, do something more conventional. And we've seen it multiple times, even last night's game, like trying to go for the deep ball on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 as opposed to converting to try to win the game. So I actually don't criticize him that much, because I think had he gotten it, nobody would be like, oh, why did you do that? Everybody would be like, wow, the Chargers won the game. And it's what you see guys like Andy Reid and McVay doing all the time, who are the prior Super Bowl winning head coaches. So I think it's easy to pick on them because they haven't won yet. But at the same time, if I have an offense that good, I trust in my offense more than my defense, given the fact that my defense just gave up a ton of points to the Cleveland Browns and couldn't stop them. So that's my perspective.
I'm with Zach, but I do agree with Cy that if you're going to do a 4th and 1 like that when you're ahead, you need to be able to do it running the football, or like the Eagles do, just QB sneak with Jalen Hurts. But Cy, who's your first goat?
So this is great because I haven't made him my punching bag or goat yet thus far, but it's time for me to start because I've given him multiple seasons. I know this guy's been one of Evan's guys, somebody he roots for. I understand he made the playoffs last year, but Derek Carr has no excuses right now. All right, I'm tired of people being like, oh, Derek Carr, pay him, like he's gonna lead his team to the promised land eventually. He just needs more weapons. Like he needs this, he needs that. Well, you got everybody you need and then some right now, buddy, and you have nothing to show for it. You've lost 4 games. You've lost 4 games so far this season by 1 score. And you have Devontae Adams on your team. You have Waller, who unfortunately got hurt yesterday but was healthy for pretty much the whole season. You have a pretty solid defense, and you have a guy in Josh Jacobs who people weren't expecting a lot out of and has been absolutely balling. So what's your excuse? That's what I got to ask Derek Carr, because yeah, you made the playoffs last year, and I commend you for that. But the flip side to that is after making the playoffs last year and after multiple seasons of underwhelming in prior years, you're giving your guy Devontae Adams from Fresno State, who you used to play with, and who I would argue is the best receiver, if not a top 2 receiver in the NFL right now. And you're still not converting these huge, important, 1-possession games that are required for you to win. And, that's a team that got a lot of credit for making big offseason moves and adding on their defense and adding on their offense and everything like that. And what do they have to show for it? A 1-4 start. And I put that on Derek Carr more than anybody. And honestly, I wanted to pick Josh McDaniels because I despise him given what he did with the Colts and how sketchy he was. So I could have picked him too, but I'm picking Carr just because McDaniels has only been coaching this team for 5 games, whereas Carr has been a part of this team for years and has 1 playoff appearance to show for it. So Derek Carr going forward, I'm going to be putting a lot more scrutiny on him, buddy.
Josh McDaniels would have been a good one. I'm giving Derek Carr a pass until I've seen this whole season through. Shocker, but...
Yeah, I don't think it was an offensive play issue. I mean, he was able to get Devontae 2 touchdowns. He dropped the ball on, he dropped the ball, perfectly into some of the receivers' hands. He threw such a pretty deep ball. I feel like he was able to consistently put points on the board. I mean, they took Kansas City toe-to-toe in Kansas City, and they were beating them by 17 to start the game. So you can't argue he started slow. I think there's maybe too much pressure put on Derek Carr right now.
Fair enough.
And the only bad loss I would say they have is the Arizona game, and that was on the defense, just letting Kyler bring it back. I mean, that wasn't really on Derek Carr. But I'll switch it over to my second one. My second one's going to be Jalen Reagor. So Jalen Reagor, drafted by the Eagles. I believe it was a single pick ahead of Justin Jefferson. For those that don't know the story, the Vikings front office and coaching staff watching the draft heard that the Eagles were going to, another team, by the way, that was in the market for a wide receiver in that draft, heard that the Eagles decided to select Jalen Reagor instead of Justin Jefferson. And, similar to me at reading tweets on Thursday night, I'm pretty sure they were on the ground laughing and celebrating. So they decided to go ahead and take Justin Jefferson, who's now one of the 2 best receivers in the NFL. And Jalen Reagor, after several awful years in Philly, 2 muffed punts in a playoff game against Tampa Bay last year, booed at several times, is now in Minnesota as the 4th receiver to the number 1 Justin Jefferson. Got some heavy boos when he went back to Philly a few weeks ago. So Jalen Reagor, 1 pick ahead of Justin Jefferson. Yikes. It's my number 2.
I love that we brought up Jalen Reagor because I don't think we'll ever talk about him again as a relevant player in the NFL. So at least he got some love out of Ev. Well, I guess hate out of Ev, but at least his name was mentioned because I don't think any other sports podcast or sports show has mentioned Jalen Reagor in years. So shout out to you for that, Ev. Go ahead.
Tag him on the social this week, Si. See what we get.
Oh, yeah, he actually might respond. I don't know if he has too many followers, so you know what? We'll actually we might have to follow through with that one. But I'll actually mention a guy that we probably haven't talked about a lot on our podcast too. But one player I wanted to talk about was Zeke Elliott and being the bad, right, or the punching bag, and then why are they not using Tony Pollard more? So now that we're 5 weeks through the season, I couldn't help but stumble upon the statistics between those 2 Cowboy players because they're having a lot of success even with Dak Prescott out right now. So the stats are this. So Zeke has double the amount of carries that Tony Pollard has for 40 more yards total and 1 touchdown, and he has 20 receiving yards, getting paid $18 million a year. This is why you don't sign running backs to 6-year, $90 million contracts. And if anything, if they're really good, you sign them to 3 or 4 years because you never know what's going to happen. You're seeing it with McCaffrey right now. He got signed to a 4-year mega deal in Carolina, and, he can't stay healthy 2 of those years, even as great as he is. Zeke is staying relatively healthy. He just can't generate anything offensively. He's averaging 3.8 yards a carry. Now let's talk about Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard's getting paid $1.3 million a year. Now, given he's under his rookie deal, but he's going to get paid somewhere else, and I don't know if the Cowboys have the capital to pay for him because they've exhausted all of it in the running back department. Tony Pollard is averaging 5.6 yards a carry. He has 2 touchdowns, and he has way more receiving yards than Zeke does, despite the fact that he has a half of the opportunities. I think we've talked about this for a while where Tony Pollard was a great 1-2 combo, but at this point he's just straight up outplaying him. And despite the fact that Zeke amassed 1,000 yards last year, if you look at his statistics over a 3-4 year period, it's really, really inconsistent. And it just goes to show you, don't pay running backs on long-term deals because, Zeke is crippling the Cowboys from a financial standpoint in 2023 and 2024. So that's my player, that's my punching bag.
I actually kind of disagree with that because even though Zeke is averaging right around 4 yards per carry, 3.8, that's actually not. It's not great, but it's not terrible. The way that I think they're using him, especially given the fact that they're finding success as an offense with their backup quarterback in Cooper Rush and the fact that they're winning games, I don't have a problem with it because I think it's kind of genius when you know Zeke is the guy that, like, if you need a couple yards or you need that first down conversion, you give him the ball, he can bounce off a couple guys and get the first down. Whereas Tony Pollard, the flip side to it is, I know you mentioned Zeke's gotten 20, 30 more carries than Tony Pollard has. Flip side of that is Tony Pollard's getting way more receptions than Zeke is. And Pollard is somebody that I want to get the ball in space anyway because he's so dynamic. Now, granted, I don't dispute that you could give Pollard the ball a little bit more and probably have him find success. But this is a great way to preserve a young player that's under contract for you if you're able to find success by kind of splitting up the way you're utilizing him, because Pollard really only needs a couple plays in space to pop one. And I think they've done a pretty good job of managing his reps and continuing to allow him to make an impact on that offense. So that's kind of how I look at it, especially when you're already paying a guy $18 million. You can't just put him on your bench. That's kind of part of it too. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the other funny part about this segment is that it's like you have these guys that the media and the social world turns into punching bags, and then it's also the element of, is it fair or is it unfair? Exactly. I think Zeke's is a little unfair, although I also do agree with Zach that I think they should be getting like an even amount of touches. Like Sai said, Pollard more in space, a little more creative usage. Zeke churns out yards, but Zach, the reason he doesn't get on the field as much is because he can't pass block. There's a running joke in my college group chat about like all these guys that you watch and you're like, why are they not getting more touches? And it's always they can't pass block. Khalil Herbert's another one that like Khalil Herbert is awful at pass blocking. And Montgomery's good, so but it's like always the same answer, and we're like, oh god, you look at the pass blocking data. So
Herbert didn't have to learn the pass block because we couldn't throw for anything at Virginia Tech. So all he was accustomed to was taking end arounds and handoffs down the middle of the field. So you can't blame the guy for a crappy hokey offense. But yeah, Pollard, it's interesting. But yeah, Ev, I'll kick it over to you for your next one.
I think we're on. Oh no, Sai, right?
Yeah,
your second.
So Sai's gonna give a second.
So I'm assuming we're giving 3 total, right, gentlemen? Because the aspect for me is. I said earlier I was thinking about potentially throwing a curveball, but then I was like, I'm going to stop myself because it's an NFL segment, and I just wanted to rip Texas real quick after they won 48-0 because I was hearing a bunch of UT fans talking all this smack because they're like, oh, with Quinn, this and that. But I won't get into college football right now as much as I want to rant, and I'm going to divert my attention to a man out of Duke. Prior to this season, he got plenty of criticism, so he was a punching bag for the entire country. But given the fact that this team has shockingly started the season 4-1 and are very much in contention right now, I feel like people aren't talking about him as much. But I feel like now more than ever, I want to call out Daniel Jones because that team is 4-1, and if they had a competent / above average quarterback, that ceiling is endless. With the new head coaching, with Saquon playing like arguably the best running back in the league this year, with that defense making big plays on big downs and getting stops when they need to, if they could convert Daniel Jones into anybody of relevance at quarterback, that team right now would be a Super Bowl contender in my opinion, because they're doing this with the majority of their starting receivers out too. And when you look at Jones, he constantly puts them in positions where it's like, if you watch the Giants games, it's like these games should be easier for them. And all he does is kind of like make their life a little bit more difficult, but then, Saquon and other players make up for that. So I'm not going to dive too deep into it because we've all had our own qualms with Daniel Jones in the past. But every time I watch that team, all I can think about is, boy, if Daniel Jones could be replaced by somebody who's like a top 12-ish quarterback, that team's ceiling is so much higher and their floor is so much higher. So I'm just going to take the time to pick on a team that's winning and pick on a player that I think could make them even better. So
Daniel Jones is a hilarious one because my favorite thing is like during the preseason, Twitter will be like picking on practice footage where he just like makes a horrible throw or is like throwing one away and they're like make it out to seem like he was like trying to hit his receiver when in reality he's just throwing it away. So like Twitter has fun with Daniel Jones. I think that's a good one. But I don't think he's been horrible this year though. He's definitely been a lot better. But Zach, any Daniel Jones reaction before we maybe have time to go quickly one more time through, very quickly?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I think Brian DeBull is the answer to those questions, right? He's, right now candidate for Coach of the Year. I mean, he's coaching an unbelievably the team that is not good enough to be there, in my opinion. I think they still have a lot to prove, and I don't even think they're going to get close to winning the division. But regardless, Brian DeBull is coaching himself one heck of a season, and we'll see if that continues.
Love it. All right. Quickly, one last time through, maybe a minute apiece, but I'm going to go to defensive backs. I got 2 half honorable mentions. One, Eli Apple. Obviously, the burnt toast memes, it's just everywhere since the Super Bowl, and people trash talking him constantly, including Tyreek Hill, although the Bengals got the best of him. So I think it's almost a little too much hate. I mean, he struggles a little bit here and there, but maybe a little more here and there. But Eli Apple won. And then I don't even remember this guy's first name, but that guy's Sorensen that played on the Chiefs last year. Every single time there would be a long pass against the Chiefs, it'd be like, oh, must be Sorensen back there. And sure enough, most of the time it was. So those are my 2 quick honorable mentions on the defensive side.
That's a good one. Actually, I'll jump on the Sorensen one. My favorite memes were when Tyrann Mathieu was still a part of the Chiefs, and they were playing safety alongside of each other. And Tyrann obviously plays a little bit more aggressive, so he'd be trying to stop the run or covering a tight end or a slot guy. And then he would turn around for the deep ball, and he would just put his hands up in the air because he knew that Sorensen had blown coverage. And there are multiple pictures of it. It was like once a week you would see Tyrann Mathieu with his hands up and Sorensen chasing some guy who would breach coverage and was like 15 yards away from him, and for like a 60, 70-yard touchdown. So, Sal, I'll kick it over to you.
So real quick, I don't care if the Bengals got the better of the Dolphins, even though I picked it, the Bengals still win. Tyreek Hill still put up 160 yards against Eli Apple after calling him out. So if anything, that made Eli Apple look even worse. So that's one quick thing. The other thing is I'm gonna diss him whether his team goes 16-0 and wins the Super Bowl, goes 0-16, doesn't win anything. But I just gotta say the name Cliff Kingsbury when we talk about punching bags because I'm just so tired of him continuing to get opportunities because the Cardinals just float around. And I say it every week, and I'm gonna take this opportunity to say it again. So that's all I got.
Really goes. It really kind of combines in with college coaches in general coaching the NFL. I mean, you just saw Matt Rule got canned as of, I think it was like earlier today, coming from Baylor off of 2 years of a great performance. Temple before that, his college offense doesn't necessarily translate to the NFL well. And then you also see that with Urban Meyer, who was arguably the worst coach ever in NFL history, given his tenure. But I'll kind of move forward here. I just wanted to pick on like the refs. And how much the punching bags that the refs are, because I think in this particular case and after this week it's pretty justifiable, right? So obviously because Tom Brady got tackled, you have to throw the flag there. My Falcons, Grady Jarrett made this great play on a 3rd down, tackling Tom Brady to get the ball back and potentially put the Falcons in a position to win late. And it was called because he tackled him too hard, a.k.a. the quarterbacks they are receiving the royal treatment, I feel like, and it's really taken a lot of players off and coaches, obviously. You're coaching a great scheme. Another good example of that was last night where Chris Jones recorded a sack off the edge, which he rarely plays. So it was a really, really strategic defensive alignment to allow him to get around the right tackle and make an explosive play and sack the quarterback Derek Carr and also recover a fumble. So it was a forced fumble, recover fumble, and a sack. All of those stats are wiped away because he hit the quarterback too hard.